Cornelius Nero did not even flinch when the chair across from him scraped backward against the polished floor of the restaurant. He was watching the wine. 2 glasses sat in front of him, both filled with dark red wine he would never taste. But he'd ordered it anyway because that's what people did on dates. Across from him, the woman had already gathered her designer purse, her movements efficient and final. She wasn't cruel, and she wasn't apologetic, which somehow made it worse. "This was a mistake," she said evenly, her tone careful and distant. Cornelius felt the old impulse stir, the one that could make her stay with nothing more than a glance, that could rewrite her will with a whisper. Then it faded, deliberate and chosen. He'd sworn he was done controlling hearts that didn't choose him freely. She looked once at his clothing, once at the modest meal he'd ordered, and once at his face, pale and ageless, though she registered it only as handsome but not enough. Then she stood as if the evening had already been erased from her memory. She didn't say goodbye, didn't offer an excuse or apologize for cutting the evening short. She just turned and walked past tables draped in green garland and flickering candlelight, past couples leaning close and families laughing too loud. Her heels barely made a sound. Cornelius sat perfectly still. Around him, the restaurant buzzed with warmth. Christmas music played somewhere overhead, soft and distant. Gold lights blinked in lazy patterns above the bar. Everyone else belonged to the noise and the glow. Cornelius belonged to the silence between. Before we continue, let us know in the comment section what time it is and where you are watching from. And remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss the rest of the story. Now, let's continue. He reached for the wine glass, not to drink, but to hold something. The stem was cool against his fingers. Colder than a living man's hand should be, but no one here would notice. No one ever looked closely enough. That's when he sensed her. Not the blind date who'd left. Someone else. Someone whose heartbeat was slightly faster than it should be, whose footsteps hesitated 3 paces from his table. Cornelius didn't turn. He'd learned over lifetimes not to startle mortals with the unnatural stillness of his attention. But then a hand, warm, trembling slightly, set something down beside his untouched plate. A card. Handmade. The edges uneven, the handwriting careful. "Merry Christmas," a soft voice said, barely above a whisper. He looked up. The waitress standing beside his table wasn't his server. Her name tag read Tiffany, and her blonde hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore a vibrant red shirt and white apron, standard uniform. Nothing remarkable. But her eyes, anxious, kind, devastatingly human, were fixed on him with something he hadn't seen directed at him in longer than he could remember. Not fear. Not desire. Not calculation. Concern. She faltered, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her apron. "I noticed you were alone, and I thought, everyone deserves to feel seen today." Before Cornelius could respond, before 3 centuries of courtly language could form a reply, she turned and hurried back toward the kitchen, her face flushed as if she'd done something forbidden. He sat perfectly still, staring at the card. Inside, in that same careful handwriting, was a simple message. Everyone deserves to feel seen today. Something shifted. Not in the room. In him. No one had given him something like this. No one had looked at him sitting alone and thought he might need kindness instead of fear. Or desire. Or obedience. She hadn't recognized him. Hadn't sensed what he was. Hadn't seen the predator beneath the pale skin and simple clothes. She'd just seen a man sitting alone on Christmas Eve. And her instinct hadn't been to judge him, or ignore him, or use him. It had been to offer something. For the first time in 300 years, Cornelius Nero, vampire king, immortal predator, architect of empires that had crumbled to dust, felt the weight of his isolation crack. Not shatter, not break, just crack. Enough to let something in. He stood slowly, left cash on the table, more than the meal cost, and walked toward the door. But he slipped the card into his coat pocket, and as the cold December air hit his face, Cornelius Nero realized something that should have terrified him. He wanted to see her again. 4 days passed before Cornelius returned to the restaurant. He told himself he was being cautious, deliberate, that showing up the next night would seem strange, and he'd spent 3 centuries learning how not to seem strange. But the truth was simpler and far more unsettling. He was nervous. The card was still in his coat pocket. He'd read it perhaps 24 times, running his thumb over the careful handwriting until he'd memorized the exact slant of her letters. Everyone deserves to feel seen today. He arrived at 9:30, half an hour before closing. Late enough that the dinner rush had cleared, early enough that the staff would still be working. The parking lot was nearly empty, just a few scattered cars under the amber glow of streetlights. Through the wide front windows, he could see her. Tiffany was moving between tables with that same quiet efficiency, clearing plates and wiping down surfaces. She smiled at an elderly couple as they shuffled toward the door, her hands full of dishes, but her attention fully on them. "Drive safe," she called after them. "The roads might be icy." The old man waved. His wife touched Tiffany's arm in passing, the kind of casual affection you only gave to people who'd earned it. Cornelius stayed in the shadows across the street, perfectly still, watching. A family with young children came out next. One of the kids, a boy, maybe 5, was crying. Big, hiccuping sobs that echoed across the parking lot. His parents looked exhausted, trying to soothe him while juggling coats and a diaper bag. Tiffany appeared in the doorway. She crouched down to the child's level, her red shirt bright against the dark night, and said something Cornelius couldn't hear. Then she pulled something from her apron pocket. A candy cane. The boy's crying slowed. He took it carefully, like it was something precious. Tiffany ruffled his hair and stood, waving as the family loaded into their car. She didn't do it for tips. They'd already paid. Didn't do it because anyone was watching. She did it because a child was sad and she had something that might help. Cornelius felt something tighten in his chest. When was the last time he'd done something without calculating the return? When was the last time he'd offered comfort because someone needed it, not because it served a purpose? 300 years ago, perhaps. Before he'd learned that kindness was a liability. Before he'd built walls so high that nothing could reach him. But Tiffany hadn't built walls. She moved through the world with her heart exposed, offering pieces of herself to strangers. The elderly couple, the crying child, a man sitting alone on Christmas Eve. It should have seemed foolish, dangerous even. Instead, it seemed like the bravest thing Cornelius had ever witnessed. Inside, the lights dimmed. The last few customers trickled out. Tiffany disappeared toward the back, probably helping close the kitchen. Cornelius knew he should leave. Watching her like this, from the shadows, uninvited, crossed lines he'd promised himself he wouldn't cross. But he didn't move. Not yet. Because for the first time in centuries, he wasn't watching prey. He was watching someone he wanted to understand. Someone who still remembered how to be human in all the ways that mattered. And Cornelius Nero, architect of empires, realized with creeping certainty that he had no idea how to approach her without ruining it. Cornelius spent 3 days learning Tiffany's routine. Not through compulsion or supernatural means. Just observation. The old-fashioned way mortals did it, with patience and attention. She stopped at the same coffee shop every Tuesday and Thursday morning. A small place 2 blocks from the restaurant, the kind with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. She always ordered the same thing, something with caramel, he thought, and sat in the corner with a book. Thursday morning, Cornelius was already there when she arrived. He'd chosen a table near the window, close enough to seem coincidental, far enough not to crowd. He had a cup of black coffee in front of him, another drink he couldn't taste but had ordered anyway, and a newspaper he wasn't reading. The bell above the door chimed. Tiffany walked in, her blonde hair loose today, her coat dotted with melting snow. She didn't notice him at first. She was focused on her phone, texting someone, her expression slightly anxious. Cornelius waited. She ordered,
paid,
turned toward the seating area. Their eyes met. Recognition flickered across her face. Confusion first, then something softer. She hesitated, clearly uncertain whether to acknowledge him. Cornelius made the decision easier. He looked up, let surprise register on his face, and offered a small nod. She smiled. Nervous, but genuine. Hi, she said, stepping closer. You were at the restaurant, right? On Christmas Eve. I was. He gestured to the empty chair across from him. Would you like to sit? She glanced at her phone, then at the chair, then back at him. Just for a minute, she said. 3 hours later, they were still talking. Cornelius had forgotten this part. How mortals built connection through conversation, through the slow accumulation of shared thoughts and confessions. He'd spent so long using compulsion to shortcut intimacy that he'd nearly forgotten how to do it honestly. But he was careful now. Ruthlessly careful. Every time he felt the pull to influence her, to make her laugh, to deepen her interest, to smooth over an awkward pause, he crushed it. He wanted her real reactions, her actual thoughts, not the version of herself his power would create. She told him about the restaurant, how she'd worked there for 2 years, saving money, trying to figure out what came next. I have this dream, she said, her fingers wrapped around her third cup of coffee. It's probably stupid, but I want to open a bookshop. A small one. The kind where people can just stay.
read,
Drink tea. Not feel rushed. That's not stupid, Cornelius said. It's impractical. She laughed, but there was an edge to it. Self-doubt, maybe. I don't have the money. Or the business experience. And I get anxious about everything, so the idea of running something on my own is... She shook her head.
Yeah.
It's just a dream. Cornelius watched her. Really watched her. The way her hands fidgeted when she talked about things that mattered. The way she deflected her own hopes as if they were inconveniences. Anxiety, he said carefully. Does it happen often? She looked surprised that he'd asked. That he'd noticed. Every day, she admitted. Some days worse than others. That night, when I gave you the card, I almost didn't. I stood there for like 5 minutes trying to talk myself into it. She smiled faintly. Figured you'd think I was weird. I didn't think that. No.
No.
He paused, choosing his words. I thought it was kind. The kind of thing most people wouldn't do, because it's easier not to. Something shifted in her expression.
Softened.
What about you? She asked. What do you do? Cornelius had prepared for this. A lie that was close enough to truth. I'm between things, he said. I've done a lot of different work over the years. Right now I'm just trying to figure out what feels real. It wasn't compulsion that made her nod in understanding. It was connection. And for the first time in 300 years, Cornelius wasn't planning his next move. He was just here. Listening. Present. They met again the following week. Then 3 days after that. It wasn't planned, not formally. But Tiffany started texting him when she had a free afternoon, and Cornelius found himself saying yes before he'd thought through the logistics. Before he'd calculated whether it was safe. Their third meeting was at her apartment. She'd invited him for dinner. Nothing fancy, she'd said. Just pasta and whatever wine he wanted to bring. Her place was small, a studio on the second floor of an old building with creaky stairs and thin walls. Books were stacked everywhere, on shelves, on the floor, on the narrow windowsill overlooking the street. "Sorry about the mess," she said, moving a pile of paperbacks off the couch. "I kind of collect them." "Don't apologize." Cornelius scanned the spines. Classic literature mixed with fantasy novels and poetry collections. "This is what your bookshop would look like." She smiled. "Exactly like this. Chaotic and perfect." She moved into the kitchen, really just a corner of the room with a stove and a narrow counter. Cornelius stayed near the couch, watching her work. She moved with the same careful efficiency she had at the restaurant, chopping vegetables, stirring sauce, humming something soft under her breath. Normal. Easy. Human. He'd almost forgotten how sharp the hunger could be when he let his guard down. "Can you open the wine?" Tiffany called over her shoulder. "Opener's in the drawer by the sink." Cornelius crossed to the kitchen. The space was tight, barely enough room for one person, let alone two. He found the drawer, found the opener, reached for the bottle on the counter. Tiffany turned at the same moment, a glass in her hand. They collided. Not hard, just a bump. But the glass slipped from her fingers and shattered against the tile floor. "Damn it," she muttered, crouching immediately to pick up the pieces. "Don't." Cornelius started, but it was too late. She hissed in pain and pulled her hand back. Blood welled up across her palm where a shard had cut the skin. The smell hit him instantly.
Copper. Salt. Life.
Cornelius went absolutely still. Every instinct he'd spent decades suppressing roared to the surface. The hunger wasn't abstract anymore. It was immediate, visceral, demanding. His vision sharpened. His hearing narrowed to the sound of her pulse, fast and strong, pumping blood through fragile veins. He could hear her heartbeat. He could smell her. "It's not bad," Tiffany was saying, standing up and moving toward the sink. "Just a little cut. I'm always doing stuff like this." Cornelius stepped back. Then again. His hands were shaking. He clenched them into fists, felt his nails, two sharp, almost claws, dig into his palms. "Cornelius?" He forced himself to meet her eyes. She was looking at him with concern, her bleeding hand held under running water. Concern. For him. She had no idea. "I need to go," he said. His voice came out rougher than intended.
What?
"Are you okay?" "I'm fine. He was already moving toward the door, his movements too fast, barely controlled. "I'm sorry. I have to leave." Did I do something wrong? The question stopped him for half a second. She thought she'd done something wrong. She was bleeding and worried that she'd offended him. "No," he managed. "You didn't. I'll call you." He was out the door before she could respond. The hallway was dimly lit and blessedly empty. Cornelius leaned against the wall, eyes closed, forcing his breathing to slow even though he didn't technically need to breathe. The hunger was still there, crawling under his skin, whispering, 300 years, and it had never fully gone away. He'd thought he had control. Thought proximity to her wouldn't matter because he'd trained himself, starved himself, learned to live on the bare minimum. But control wasn't the same as immunity. And the man who wanted to sit in her tiny apartment and talk about books was losing ground to the thing that wanted to sink fangs into her throat and drain her until the heartbeat stopped. Cornelius pushed off the wall and walked down the stairs, out into the cold night air. He didn't go home. He hunted. Not her. Never her. Because the alternative was going back. And if he went back now, he wasn't sure which part of him would win. Tiffany didn't text him for 3 days. Cornelius told himself he deserved the silence. That running out of her apartment without explanation had probably confirmed whatever doubts she'd been nursing about him. That it was better this way, cleaner, safer for both of them. But on the 4th day, his phone buzzed. "Are you avoiding me? Or did I actually do something wrong?" He stared at the message for a long time. Then he typed, "Can we meet? I owe you an explanation." They met at a park near the river at dusk. Neutral ground. Public enough to feel safe. Empty enough to talk honestly. The evening was cold and gray, that brief window between daylight and dark when the winter sky turned everything colorless. Tiffany was already there when he arrived, sitting on a bench with her hands shoved into her coat pockets. She looked up as he approached, her expression guarded but not hostile.
"Hi," she said.
"Hi." Cornelius sat down beside her, leaving space between them. "Thank you for coming." "I almost didn't." She watched a jogger pass by on the path. "I thought maybe you'd bailed. Wouldn't be the first time." The casual hurt in her voice made something twist in his chest. "That's not what happened," he said carefully. "Then what had happened?" She turned to face him. "Because 1 minute we're having a nice time, and the next you're running out like the building's on fire." Cornelius looked down at his hands, pale against the dark fabric of his coat. Steady now, but he remembered how they'd shaken. "I'm not good at this," he started. "At connecting. At letting people close." "Okay. I've lived a long time in isolation," he continued, choosing each word with precision.
"By choice, mostly. It's easier that way."
"Simpler. But it means I don't always know how to act when someone," he paused. "When someone matters." Tiffany was quiet for a moment. "How long?" she asked. "What? How long have you been isolated?" Cornelius almost smiled. Leave it to her to ask the one question he couldn't answer honestly. "Longer than you'd believe," he said. "Long enough that I've forgotten how to do this without ruining it." She pulled her hands from her pockets and folded them in her lap. Her palm was bandaged where she'd cut it. "I get that," she said softly. "Feeling like you don't know how to be around people. Like there's something fundamentally different about you that makes normal things harder." He looked at her. "My anxiety isn't just nervousness," Tiffany continued. "It's this constant background noise telling me I'm doing everything wrong. That people can tell there's something off about me. So I keep distance too. It's safer." She laughed quietly. "Easier to be alone than to let someone see you and decide you're too much work." Cornelius felt something settle in his chest. Not relief, exactly, but recognition. "You're not too much work," he said. "Neither are you." She met his eyes. "But you have to stop running. If something's wrong, if you need space, just tell me. I can handle honesty. I can't handle disappearing acts." He wanted to tell her everything. The truth about what he was, why he'd really left, the 300-year gap between them that made this entire thing impossible. But he couldn't. Not yet. So he told her what he could. "I'm old-fashioned," he said. "I don't connect the way normal people do. I have habits that don't make sense. Rules I follow that probably seem strange. And there are things about me that," he stopped. Started again. "There are things I can't explain yet. But I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying very hard to do the opposite." Tiffany studied his face for a long moment. Then she reached over and took his hand. Her palm was warm. His was cold. She didn't pull away. "Okay," she said simply. "Then let's try. Both of us. No more running." Cornelius looked down at their joined hands, mortal and immortal, warmth and cold, and realized he'd just made a promise he had no idea how to keep. But he nodded anyway. No more running. 2 weeks passed, and they fell into a rhythm.
Coffee twice a week.
Dinner when Tiffany's schedule allowed. Long text conversations that stretched past midnight, though Cornelius never explained why he was always awake.
She didn't ask.
Not yet. But he could feel her noticing. The night walk wasn't planned. Tiffany had finished a closing shift at the restaurant, and Cornelius had been waiting outside, something he'd started doing when she worked late. Not hovering.
Just there.
Making sure she got to her car safely. You know you don't have to do this, she'd said, pulling her coat tighter against the February cold. I know, but you do it anyway. I do. She'd smiled at that, then suggested they walk instead of driving. The streets were quiet, the kind of late-night stillness that made the city feel like it belonged to them alone. They walked through the empty downtown, past darkened storefronts and streetlights haloed in frost. Their breath misted in the air, hers visible, his non-existent, though she hadn't noticed yet. Tell me something about you I don't know, Tiffany said, her hands shoved deep in her pockets. Cornelius considered the question. Everything about him was something she didn't know. I don't sleep much, he offered. Insomniac. Something like that. Me too, sometimes. She glanced at him. What do you do when you can't sleep? Walk.
Read.
Think too much. She laughed.
Same.
Well, except the walking part. I'm too anxious to wander around alone at night. You're not alone now. No, she said softly. I'm not. They turned onto a side street, narrower and darker. The pavement here was slick with black ice, invisible in the dim light. Tiffany was mid-sentence, something about a difficult customer, when her foot slipped.
She didn't even have time to gasp.
One moment she was upright, the next falling backward, arms flailing for balance that wasn't there. Cornelius moved. Not human fast. Not even close. His hand caught her waist before gravity did, steadying her with a grip that was solid and completely motionless. She hadn't even hit the ground. Hadn't come close. Time seemed to pause. Tiffany was staring at him, her hands gripping his arm. His very cold arm. How did you? She blinked. You were 3 feet away. Cornelius released her carefully and stepped back, cursing himself silently. Reflex, he said. That wasn't reflex. That was... She looked down at the ice, then back at him. You moved so fast I didn't even see it. The light's bad. It probably just seemed. And you're freezing. She was still holding his arm, her warm fingers pressed against the fabric of his coat. Like, actually cold. Are you okay? I run cold, he said, forcing himself to stay calm. Always have. She let go slowly, her expression shifting from shock to something more careful. Observant. You run cold, she repeated. You don't sleep. You're always available at night, but never during the day. She wasn't accusing, just listing. Last week you mentioned something about decades ago when we were talking about music, then corrected yourself to years. Cornelius said nothing. And I've never seen you eat, Tiffany continued quietly. You order food, but you don't actually eat it. You push it around. Drink coffee, you don't finish. The silence between them stretched. A car passed on the main street, its headlights briefly illuminating them before disappearing. Cornelius. Her voice was steady, but softer now. What aren't you telling me? He could lie. He'd done it for 300 years, crafted stories so seamless that mortals never questioned them. But standing here, in the cold street with ice under their feet and her eyes searching his face, the lies felt heavier than the truth. I'm not, he stopped. Started again. I'm not what you think I am. What does that mean? It means there are things about me that don't make sense. That can't make sense. And I've been trying to find a way to tell you, but there isn't a good way. Tiffany hugged herself, not from cold, but from something else. Uncertainty, maybe. or fear? Are you dangerous? She asked. The question cut straight through him. Not to you, he said immediately. Never to you. That's not the same as no. I know. She looked at him for a long time. Her breath misted between them. His didn't. I should probably go home, she finally said. Cornelius nodded. He'd expected this. Prepared for it. But it still felt like something breaking. I'll walk you to your car, he said. They walked back in silence, the ease from earlier completely gone. When they reached her car, Tiffany unlocked it, but didn't get in right away. I'm not scared of you, she said, not looking at him. But I'm confused. And I need time to think. I understand. She got in, started the engine, then rolled down the window. Just tell me one thing, she said. Whatever you are you trying to hurt me? No, Cornelius said. I'm trying to do the opposite. Tiffany nodded slowly. Then she drove away. And Cornelius stood alone in the empty street, watching her taillights disappear, wondering if he'd just lost the only person in 300 years who'd made him feel human. Tiffany didn't text him for 5 days. Cornelius didn't push. He'd learned patience over lifetimes, learned that mortals needed space to process things that didn't fit their understanding of the world. But the waiting felt different this time. Heavier. When her message finally came, it was careful, measured.
Can we talk?
They met at the same coffee shop where they'd had their first real conversation. Tiffany was already there, hands wrapped around a cup she hadn't touched. She looked tired. Beautiful, but tired. Hi, she said as he sat down. Hi. She took a breath. Let it out slowly. I've been thinking about what you said. About not being what I think you are. She met his eyes. And I realized I don't actually know what I think you are. I just know I like being around you. And that scares me less than not being around you. Something in Cornelius's chest loosened. So, I want to try, Tiffany continued. But I need you to be honest with me, when you can, about whatever this is.
I will, he said.
I promise.
She smiled then.
Small, but genuine. Okay, good. She pulled out her phone. So, I was thinking it's supposed to be nice this Saturday.
Sunny.
We could do a picnic? There's this park by the river with trails and… I can't. The words came out too fast.
Too sharp.
Tiffany's smile faltered.
Oh, okay. Sunday, then.
No, I mean… Cornelius tried to find the right words. I can't do daytime. Not this weekend. Next weekend? Tiffany. So, not next weekend either. Her voice had changed. Cooler. When then? Cornelius said nothing. She set her phone down on the table, her expression shifting from confusion to something harder. You can't do daytime, she said slowly. Ever. It's complicated. Try me. I have a condition, he started, the lie tasting worse than it ever had before. Light sensitivity.
Severe.
Daylight it's not safe for me. Tiffany stared at him. Light sensitivity. Yes. So, you've never been outside during the day? Not in a long time. She sat back, her arms crossed. That's why you only text at night. Why you only meet me after dark. Why you were waiting outside the restaurant at 11 p.m. like that's normal. Yes. And you couldn't just tell me this? He stopped. Because she was right. He could have told her. Should have. I didn't want you to think I was making excuses. Excuses for what? For being unavailable. For not being able to give you a normal relationship. A normal? Tiffany laughed, but there was no humor in it. Cornelius, I work nights at a restaurant and have crippling anxiety. I'm not exactly looking for normal. Then what are you looking for? Honesty, she said. Which apparently is too much to ask. The words hit like a physical blow. "That's not fair," Cornelius said quietly. "Isn't it?" She leaned forward. "You say you're not what I think you are. You can't go outside during the day. You don't eat, you don't sleep, you're always cold, and you move like something out of a movie." Her voice cracked slightly. "So either you have a very rare medical condition or you're lying to me. And I can't tell which one scares me more." Cornelius wanted to tell her everything. Right here in the coffee shop with the winter light streaming through windows he'd carefully positioned himself away from. But the words wouldn't come. "I'm not married," he said instead. "I'm not hiding a family or another life. I'm just what? Trying not to lose you." Tiffany closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were wet. "You're losing me anyway," she said softly. "Because I can't do this. I can't be with someone who won't let me in." She stood up, gathering her coat and her untouched coffee. "Tiffany, please. When you're ready to tell me the truth," she said, "call me. But until then, I need space." She walked out. Cornelius sat alone at the table, surrounded by morning light he couldn't touch, watching her leave through glass he couldn't follow her through. And for the first time in 300 years, he understood what mortals meant when they said their heart was breaking. 3 weeks passed in silence. Cornelius didn't reach out. He'd promised himself he wouldn't push, wouldn't use proximity or persistence to wear down her resistance. If Tiffany wanted space, he'd give it to her, even if it felt like slow starvation. He still waited outside the restaurant on her closing shifts, just watching, making sure she got to her car safely. She never saw him. He made sure of that. But he was there. Old habits. Old instincts. The night it happened, Tiffany had worked a double shift. Cornelius watched her leave through the back exit just after midnight, exhaustion obvious in the slope of her shoulders. The parking lot was poorly lit, half the overhead lights burned out or broken. He should have walked away. Should have trusted that she'd be fine, that his presence wasn't needed. But something made him stay. Tiffany was halfway to her car when the man stepped out from between two vehicles. Cornelius was moving before the man spoke. "Hey." The man's voice was slurred, drunk or high or both. "You got a phone I can use?" Tiffany stopped. "I know, sorry. I don't." "Come on. Just for a second." He moved closer. Too close. "Please step back," Tiffany said, her voice shaking. The man didn't step back. He grabbed her arm. Tiffany tried to pull away. The man's grip tightened. His other hand went to her purse. Cornelius crossed 50 feet of parking lot in less than a second. The man didn't see him coming. Didn't have time to react before Cornelius's hand closed around his wrist, the one holding Tiffany, and twisted. Not hard enough to break, but close. The man screamed and let go, stumbling backward. "Leave," Cornelius said. His voice had changed. Darker. Older. The voice of something that had commanded armies.
Now.
The man took one look at Cornelius's face and ran. Silence fell over the parking lot. Tiffany was pressed against her car, breathing hard, her eyes wide. "Are you hurt?" Cornelius asked, forcing his voice back to something human. "I know. I'm okay." She was staring at him. "How did you?" Cornelius stepped back, giving her space. "I was closer than you thought." "No, you weren't." Her voice was shaking. "You moved like—"
She stopped.
Her gaze had shifted to something behind him. The car window, dark and reflective. Cornelius saw the moment she understood. She was looking at the window, at her own reflection, clear in the glass, at the empty space where he should have been. "Oh my God," she whispered. Cornelius went very still. Tiffany's hand went to her mouth. She took a step back, then another. "Tiffany, you don't have a reflection. Please let me explain. You don't have a reflection. She was backing toward the restaurant now, her eyes never leaving him. And your eyes. They're different. Red around the edges. I can see. Cornelius realized too late that his control had slipped, that the adrenaline of the confrontation had brought things to the surface he normally kept buried. His fangs were visible, not fully extended,
But there.
sharp and undeniable. Tiffany made a sound that might have been a sob. "What are you?" she asked. Cornelius forced himself to breathe, to stay calm, to not move closer, even though every instinct screamed at him to comfort her. "My name isn't Cornelius Nero," he said quietly.
It was.
300 years ago. Before I was turned. Before I became, he stopped. "I'm a vampire, Tiffany. I've been alive since 1724. And everything I told you is true, except the one thing that matters most." The silence stretched between them. "You're a vampire," Tiffany repeated. Her voice was completely flat. "Yes. Vampires are real. Yes. And you." She looked at him like she'd never seen him before. "You've been lying to me this entire time." "Not lying. Just not telling you something I didn't know how to explain." "You drink blood." It wasn't a question. "Yes," Cornelius said. "But not, I don't hurt people. I haven't in decades. I feed, but carefully. Consensually when possible. Never fatally." Tiffany's face had gone pale. "Oh my God. Oh my God. I would never hurt you," Cornelius said desperately. "That's why I've been so careful. Why I kept distance. I wanted you to know me, the real me, not the monster." "You are a monster," she whispered. The words cut deeper than they should have. "I know," Cornelius said. Tiffany shook her head, tears streaming down her face now. "I need to go," she said. "I need to. I can't." She turned and ran. Not to her car. Back to the restaurant.
To safety.
To light and people and things that made sense. Away from him. Cornelius stood alone in the parking lot, surrounded by empty cars and broken streetlights. And he let her go. Because that's what you did when you loved someone. Even when it destroyed you. For weeks passed before Cornelius left the letter. He didn't call.
Didn't text.
Didn't wait outside the restaurant anymore. He gave Tiffany what she'd asked for before she'd known the truth. Space. But the silence was different now.
Heavier.
He'd spent 300 years alone, and never felt it the way he did now. The letter took him 2 weeks to write. He'd started it a dozen times, each version too formal or too desperate or too much of an excuse. Finally, he stopped trying to craft it and just wrote what was true. He left it at her door on a Wednesday night, slipped under the frame where she'd find it in the morning. Then he walked away before he could second-guess himself. The letter said,
"Tiffany,
I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to understand. I'm writing this because you deserve to know what you gave me, even if you never want to see me again. For 300 years, I have been powerful, but empty. A king without a kingdom worth ruling. I've had wealth, influence, the ability to make people do whatever I wanted with nothing more than a glance. But none of it mattered, because none of it was real. Then you gave me a card on Christmas Eve. You saw a man sitting alone, and thought he deserved kindness. Not because you wanted something from me. Not because I compelled you to care. You just saw someone who needed to be seen, and you offered the only thing that actually matters. Your humanity. You reminded me what it meant to be a person instead of a monster. What it felt like to be chosen instead of obeyed. I know what I am. I know what I'll always be. But for a few months, you made me feel like I could be something more than that. Like immortality didn't have to mean isolation. I'm not asking you to come back. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know that you gave an immortal something to live for. And that's a gift I'll carry for however many centuries I have left.
Thank you for seeing me.
Cornelius. He didn't hear from her. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Cornelius left the city. Not permanently. He still owned property here, still had roots too deep to fully sever. But he needed distance. Needed to stop hoping every notification on his phone might be her. He traveled. Fed carefully.
Existed.
But he didn't live. Not the way he had when she was in his world. Christmas came again. Cornelius told himself he wouldn't go back to the restaurant. It would be masochistic.
Pointless.
A way of torturing himself with memories of what he'd briefly had and lost. But on Christmas Eve, he found himself walking through the same doors anyway. The decorations were the same. Green garland and gold lights, and tables full of people celebrating things that would be forgotten by February. The host tried to seat him near the bar, but Cornelius requested a specific table. The one he'd sat at a year ago. The one where this had all started. He ordered 2 glasses of wine. Both red. Both untouched. The restaurant hummed around him. Laughter and music and the gentle chaos of a holiday evening. Cornelius sat in the center of it all, perfectly still, watching condensation slide down a glass he couldn't drink. Just like last year. Except last year, he'd still had hope. He was reaching for his coat when he felt her. Not sensed.
Felt.
The air shifted. His entire body went still. Tiffany was standing 3 feet from his table. She looked different. Her hair was shorter. She wore a dark green dress he'd never seen before. But her eyes, anxious, kind, devastatingly human, were exactly the same. "Hi," she said quietly. Cornelius couldn't breathe. Didn't need to, but forgot that for a moment. "Hi," he managed. Tiffany looked at the empty chair across from him. The 2 glasses of wine. The space he'd left open without realizing it. "Is this seat taken?" she asked.
No.
She sat down. Silence stretched between them. Not uncomfortable, just heavy with everything unsaid. "I got your letter," Tiffany finally said. "I've read it about 100 times." Cornelius said nothing.
Didn't trust himself to speak.
"I was terrified," she continued. "For weeks, I couldn't sleep. Couldn't stop thinking about what you were. What you could do." She looked down at her hands. "But then I realized I was more scared of never seeing you again than I was of what you are." "Tiffany." "I'm not saying I'm okay with everything," she interrupted. "I'm not saying I understand. But I keep thinking about that card I gave you. About how everyone deserves to be seen." She met his eyes. "Even you." Cornelius felt something crack open in his chest. The same crack from a year ago, but deeper now. "I don't deserve you," he said. "Maybe not." She smiled slightly. "But I'm here anyway." She reached across the table. Her hand, warm and alive, covered his cold one. "Tell me everything," Tiffany said. "The truth this time. All of it. The parts that scare you. The parts you think will make me leave. I want to know who you really are." And Cornelius Nero, vampire king, immortal predator, creature who'd spent 300 years performing humanity without feeling it, stopped hiding. "Okay," he said. For the first time in 3 centuries, he stopped performing and simply existed in the presence of someone who chose to stay. If this story touched your heart, if you believe that true connection can bridge even the impossible, please like this video and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to remember that we all deserve to be seen exactly as we are. Your support helps us bring more stories of hope and redemption to life.